Good afternoon, everyone. Looks like we've got quite a few people joining. Looks like our internet uplink is a little slow today. And as you're coming in, if you don't mind, just going ahead and letting us know who's here in the chat. That always helps us. And we've got a link. We'll keep putting the link to the running agenda as well. We were just saying how much today feels like a Monday for us. So it's those holiday weeks that just make them so difficult, even when they're shorter, I know. All right, looks like we've got quite the crowd today. We're so glad to see everyone here. Dr. Brown with our Tulsa Regional STEM Alliance, thank you for joining us. All right. Okay, well, just as we're getting started, my name is Melissa Algram, for those of you that don't know me. I'm the Director of Reading Sufficiency, and I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Deb Wade, who is our Director for Elementary ELA, and Brenda Beamer-Chapman, who is our Director of Social Studies and Personal Finance Literacy. And these two ladies do a lot to help us out with RSA and just helping to see how we can make those connections with their already very busy jobs. So appreciate them being here, obviously, and I'm going to drop that running link, agenda link in the chat one more time. It's just a quick bit.ly that's RSA Agenda 2122, RSA is being capitalized. We have a fairly short agenda today, knowing that sometimes it becomes a little longer than I anticipate, just because we always have questions that people want to ask, which is perfectly fine. And should be able to see on my screen today the agenda. And I have, let's see, it looks like all of my people, there they are. I got my people screen back. I missed all my people. So if you have any questions as you're coming in and want to drop them in the chat, we will address what we can. Do please be aware that sometimes there are questions that come up that we're trying to get answers for, or that we're working on guidance for, that we have not received permission to release yet. So if we don't get to your specific question, we're not ignoring you. We are going back over those questions after each of these meetings to see what might need to continue to be addressed, or what we might need to investigate a little further. But sometimes we just know that we're not able to hit those in a public forum just quite yet. So, but it does help us to have those questions in the chat, because it also kind of guides some of our future work, some of the things that we know that people have interest in knowing about, so that we can make sure we get those answers for you. So as we're kind of getting started, it is report time for RSA. I know it's like Christmas, everyone's favorite time of the year. We have closed the window for the RSA reading plans. I know that there are still a very small number of districts that we're still working with, that most of them have experienced technical difficulties that we're working through. So but in the meantime, we are in the process of reviewing all of those plans. So if you ever wonder, do those things that you fill out get read? I can assure you, at least for the RSA plan, yes, every word is read by one of the members of our team. Either it's me, my two colleagues that are here, or we also have our early literacy team, which would be Lauren Jinks Jones, Nicole Silvestri, or Rachel Moley, who are also doing a lot of the review of different plans. So at this time, if you get an email from one of these ladies, really what we're trying to do is just keep you from getting out of trouble. So if we're noticing something on your plan that's going to say, if somebody comes back on that later on, that's not quite in compliance of what the statute requires. The whole reason we're contacting you is just to make sure that you are not finding yourself in hot water down the road. That's our whole purpose for doing that. So just be aware that if you do get an email or a phone call from one of us up here just saying, hey, we need to fix something on your plan, we're just asking if you could get to that as quickly as possible. just that gentle reminder that we are not able to release any RSA funds until all of the plans have been reviewed and approved by a member of our team, as well as the beginning of year reports have been completed. So that's one of the reasons that we try to get on that as quickly as possible. There are about 930 some odd schools in the state that have to complete a plan. So that's a lot of plans to read. So that's why we try to get on that as quickly as we possibly can. At the same time, we have 2 reports that are now open on single sign-on. The first one is the beginning of year report, which is due October 1. I am well aware that we have, as of last week, had some issues with that report that OMES was working on. I received an email this morning that they believe that have that fixed. So if for some reason you have tried getting on there today, I know I've had one district call about a unique issue. But it's still not saving your data or you're not able to certify. If you will just shoot me an email, all I need is your district and your school and exactly what's the problem. Screenshots always help. When you're having a problem with a...
Hey, can you print off Braxton's shot record and her transcript?
I'm sorry, what? Oh, I think somebody might need to be muted. I thought that was for me. So if you are having a problem with one of your reports, especially if you're getting an error message, sending that screenshot to be able to give to OMES and put on a report always is helpful. They usually can figure that out a lot easier and faster that way. Also, we have the promotion and retention report for 3rd graders that is now open, and it is located on the WAVE. If you will recall, we moved this over to the WAVE a couple of years ago due to a legislative change that asks us to track how students are doing that are promoted in different pathways. This one is due October 31st, so we do have some time. And just that reminder, this graphic will show you where these are located because we always have a hard time finding some of our RSA reports. So if you go on to single sign-on, you'll find the Reading Sufficiency Annual District Reading Plan is its own application. The beginning of year and end of year reports are both located under the Reading Sufficiency Act survey. And then the 3rd grade promotion retention report is located on the WAVE. So if you go on to single sign-on, go to the WAVE, and remember you have to be patient because it takes a moment to load. That's state reporting certification when you're looking for state reports, and it's going to sit here and spin on me for just a moment. You just come down here to find your district. And then that retention report should be there at the very top. You'll see that it's open. I'm not going to click on it because we do have student names already loaded in there and I don't want to violate any FERPA for any district. So, but what you will find are loaded are students who did not meet RSA criteria on the state test. So either they got a score of did not meet RSA criteria or they did not assess. And so what you'll need to do is indicate if that student was retained or promoted, and if promoted, through what pathway were they promoted, okay? Just some clicks. You do have to have that report completed to save. So you'll notice all of them are in bright yellow at first. Once you have everything indicated for that student, that row will turn white. When all of your rows are white, you are able to save that. Let me come back over here to that. Also, just a reminder, we have created just quick video tutorials for all of our reports, which can be found on the RSA Coordinator website. You'll find those right here under our timeline and assessments. You'll see those links, but we've also linked them right here in our running agenda. So you can find the tutorial for this if you have not filled out this report before, or if it's been a while and you just need that refresher. A lot of times the emails that we get asking questions or trying to troubleshoot are things that we can easily find the information on those quick video tutorials. So if you are running into a problem, that's probably your first go-to, is to see what is going on. Is there something that we need to do a little bit differently? You'll probably get a faster answer that way. But if it's something that's not answered that, then please contact me or Deb or Brenda. Any of us are happy to help you or find that answer for you. Okay, let me pause for just a moment. Brenda, Deb, do we have any questions about reports in the chat? Nope, I know
We
you're
have one.
scanning.
We have one question. We have a special ed non-reader autistic 4th grade student that was virtual last year. Do we put him on an IPRI in 4th? He took the STAR early lit test and not
Okay.
the regular STAR.
Great question. So for our students that are promoted to 4th grade, either through an exemption or through committee, what the law requires is they continue to receive intensive intervention. For students on an IEP, that intensive intervention is likely being documented through their IEP. So in the case of what you just mentioned, a special ed student is going to have an IEP that's going to be addressing some reading skills. Students who do not have an IEP need documentation that that intervention is taking place as required. So that IPRI, that individualized program of reading instruction, can provide that documentation. So it's not so much that the statute requires that the IPRI be written, it's that the statute requires that the student is receiving intensive intervention as fits their needs until they are on grade level. In this case, this student is probably not going to be there because of some of the needs that they have, at least anytime soon. But the documentation of that needs to occur. So you either can have that through that IEP with reading goals that are appropriate, or you could have that IPRI for those students that don't already have that documentation. Okay. All right. I also wanted we talked briefly about the screening assessment update last time, but I think sometimes things bear repeating because we sometimes get new people on the call or something just passes somebody by. Remember that we do have approved assessments for this school year. They have not changed, as well as the state board has approved some updates to screening assessments for the 22-23 school year. Again, this information is also located on our RSA coordinator webpage, but you'll notice that this year, just the same as last year, we have 7 assessments approved for RSA, which would be Acadians, formerly Dibbles Next, Ames Web Plus, FastBridge, iStation, Map Growth, Dibbles 8th edition, which is different from Dibbles Next Acadians. There's always a lot of confusion there. And then the STAR Early Learning. Remember that STAR Early Learning is the umbrella term that Renaissance uses to encompasses both STAR Early Literacy and STAR Reading. So when you see that STAR Early Learning, I know there's a lot of confusion there because we want to say early learning, early literacy. They're very similar in name, but that encompasses both of those assessments, okay? Beginning next year, districts may also consider using iReady, Diagnostic, Amira, or Map Reading Fluency. So these 3 are additions to this. So next year there will be 10 screeners that districts may choose from instead of 7, okay? And MD Hill, no, you did not need to fill out that IPRI for 4th and 5th grade if the IEP addresses reading goals. For K through 3, yes, the IPRI is still needed, okay? We're talking about beyond 3rd grade, okay? Not a problem.
Melissa, there's someone asking if anyone else is having trouble on the fillable IPRI on writing the retention paragraph.
The mid-year promotion, the mid-year permit. Okay, the mid-year retention. Yes, somebody had emailed me about that, and that is something I need to take care of. It's been a crazy week. So I think what I'm hearing is that on the IPRI, where we have that fillable, try not to make anyone seasick if I move around too quickly. One of the requirements in statute is that we require, we have to have the mid-year promotion policy. And it seems like right now it's only coming in as 1 line. I need to figure out how I can fix that and get that uploaded. We'll make that a priority this afternoon so that it wraps, or the text can wrap around to a paragraph. But thank you for that reminder. Okay, dyslexia screening. I know I've received a lot of questions about dyslexia screening. Please remember that this is a requirement that also will begin next year. The state board did approve screening assessments for dyslexia, again, beginning next year. There are 7 of them that were approved. All of them are extensions of RSA screening assessments. we will have, we are currently working on guidance for that. So a lot of the questions, Gail, I know you have sent me several questions, which I greatly, greatly appreciate that. So I have those printed off. We are using that to help formulate the guidance. I can't release that guidance yet because it still has to go through several layers of approval before we do that, just to make sure that what we are putting out is in compliance with what the statute says and that we're not guiding anyone in the wrong way, that somebody hasn't misinterpreted something. So when we put things out, it goes through a lot of layers of editing before we do that. But do please know that we are working on that so that there will be guidance on how we can utilize those screening assessments and what to do with that information afterwards. Please remember that these are screening assessments. So they are screening for for students who are at risk for characteristics of dyslexia. This is not a diagnosis of dyslexia. Okay, so screening would be saying, we're looking at this and there are, excuse me, indicators that a student would have difficulties with word recognition skills, which would be those characteristics for being at risk for dyslexia. So things like in phonemic awareness or phonics skills. And then some guidance for how do we address that at this point. And that could be from applying appropriate interventions with evidence-based interventions that we can look at and discuss in that guidance, all the way up to the gamut of looking at a full educational evaluation with a school psychologist. It is not the intention of this bill or this statute to start referring all of these students to special ed, nor would it be appropriate. Okay, so please keep in mind that this is not just if somebody scores on the screener, it's an automatic referral to special education. If you need to write that down, I will sign it in blood because I do not need all of our school psychs coming after me. But it is, and the intention is to identify if students are struggling with specific skills. And our RSA universal screeners catches a lot of those skills. But with that dyslexia screener, there are a few of those skills that we know are indicators for dyslexia that may not be on that general universal screening. For example, rapid naming is a skill that needed to be on there. Being able to do spelling or that encoding, as well as more advanced phonemic awareness work. So being able to manipulate sounds within a word rather than just blending and segmenting those sounds. Okay, so while we have identified those screening assessments, that was that first step. We are currently working on that guidance. We will have that out this school year so that districts have time to examine that and make a plan for themselves. So please be aware that that's coming. And then finally, I'm still getting a lot of questions about STAR. For those of you that use Renaissance STAR Early Learning as your screening assessment, I'm sure you are aware by now that they have moved from their old enterprise scale, which had a separate scale for early literacy, as opposed to STAR reading, and have now moved to a universal scale, which puts both assessments on the same continuum. And that caused those numbers to change. So in the past, that third grade proficient number for being able to move on to fourth grade was a 392. It is now a 969. And I've had to talk a few people off of a ledge because it feels like all of a sudden we just raised the bar for them. Actually, the bar is still the same. It's still at 40th percentile. It's as if we had said, we are going to grade all of our papers on a 10-point scale, and a 9 or a 10 would be an A. And now we're using a 100-point scale, and now a 90 to 100 is an A. It still means the same thing. It's just on how we related that. So just, it's okay, but keep in mind, again, that new updated guidance with that score or that table is there. Remember, we have this same guidance document for all 7 of our approved screening assessments. These numbers come from the vendor. We did not make these up at OSDE. We sent this blank form to the vendor and said, please fill this out so that we have a consistent document so that we can quickly find those answers. But you'll notice that you'll see that 40th percentile, which is that grade level target. And we have in great big red for STAR as well as for any of our other approved screeners, what that goal would be for the end of year third grade. Now, one of the questions I also get often at this time of year is, well, I have a third grade student who is scoring at let's say a 940. So do I need to put them on a plan? Well, you'll see that the goal at the beginning of year for third grade is a 938. So 940 means that they are meeting that grade level target. We do not expect students to be at the end of year expectation when it's the beginning of the year. That's why it's a moving target, because of the way those norms were created. So you're looking at this to decide who is it that needs to be on that plan. The 25th and the 10th percentile can give you some clues as to where we need to go with intensity. Obviously, the lower we are, the more intense of an intervention we might need. And then finally, another question that has come up frequently in the last couple of weeks is, what about students who are attending school virtually? Do they still have to get interventions? The short answer is yes. There is not an exemption for those students. They do need, and probably more so than some of their peers, to get any kind of help that we can provide. Now, how that help looks is, again, dependent on some district decisions and the resources available to your district. So it might look like additional time with a program, with a computerized program. Ideally, you would have a teacher that would be monitoring that and checking in with them if they're doing practice on there. It might be asking them to come to the school a couple of times a week while they're also maybe working on the program on the other days that they don't come to the school. The thought being is that the more help they need, if they're in that below that 10th percentile, what we generally call that tier 3 level, they're more than a year behind their peers, they definitely need some more intensive intervention. How can we best help them? So we want to make sure that we are aware that our students that are attending school virtually also have the opportunities to receive help as well. So. Okay, let me pause there because I just talked quite a bit about our reports as well as any screening assessment updates. Okay, Brenda.
We have questions.
I know we do. Lay it on me.
For school year 22-23, are you saying MAPS fluency replaces MAPS growth?
No, you can use either. Okay, so you could use MAP growth. MAP fluency has been approved for dyslexia screening as well as universal screening. MAP growth is only approved for universal screening under RSA. It is not approved for dyslexia screening. It does not meet those requirements. So you could use both of them in tandem. You can look at the MAP fluency, since they have demonstrated that they've met those requirements for both as well. Okay.
So there's a request for you to repeat what you said about the IPRI for 4th and 5th grade.
Okay, so students who are promoted to 4th grade from 3rd, who are promoted with an exemption or promoted with a committee, so that they're on probation. The statutory requirement is that those students would continue to receive intensive intervention until they demonstrate that they are reading on grade level according to their screening assessment. Okay. The requirement doesn't say all students have to be on an IPRI. It says all students have to be receiving intensive intervention, but you need to be able to document that. So for students who are on an IEP, an individualized education program through special education, then that documents the intervention that those students would be receiving, as long as there are reading goals on that IEP. If they are not on an IEP, if they are not receiving special education services, that IPRI can serve as that that documentation document for that intervention that it's taking place. Okay.
The dyslexia screening, there's a question about who is given this assessment. Is it all students or students who are just identified?
What the statute says is for students who are not meeting the grade level target at the beginning of the year in kindergarten through 3rd grade, would need to be screened with the dyslexia screener, would need to receive that extra layer of assessment. And again, we'll have more written guidance coming out about that this year to make sure that we have everybody on the same page.
We have students quarantined until after our fall benchmark window closes. If they test outside the window, do we include them in the beginning of your report?
If you are able to get them on your beginning of year report before it's due on October 1st, then I would, yes, go ahead and include them. Ideally, we would have everybody within that window, but sometimes we're having to work outside of ideal situations. If the student does not come back until after you have to submit that beginning of year report, then obviously go ahead and get your report turned in on time, and go ahead and write that student on an IPRI, but we would include them at the end of the year as somebody who was added after the beginning of year. Okay, so if you are able to get them on that beginning of year report, that would be the preference, to keep track of that. But if not, if you are not able to get them assessed and they come in until after that October 1 due date, we will add them in at another time. Go ahead and intervene as you would, because that's what we need to do as teachers, is make sure those kids' needs are being met. But they obviously don't want to hold on to your report until then. We want to get that turned in.
Okay, here's a question. Does it have to be a tier 3 if they are on an IPRI? Can't it be tier 2 or a different kind of support?
Yes, it can be any. Remember that those tiers describe intensity of support. The IPRI is saying that this is a student that needs support, whether it's tier 2, tier 3, how are we providing that support is what's defined on the IPRI. It does not mean that they're automatically tier 3. Remember, tier 3 should be just a few kids. Okay.
For those 4th graders for whom we are documenting intervention, does on grade level mean at the benchmark for 4th grade or simply meeting the end of your 3rd grade benchmark?
That's a great question. So let me come back and use STAR as an example. You'll notice that this grid goes up to the end of 5th grade. So right now is the beginning of year window for 4th grade. So if I have some of those students, I'm going to be looking at the beginning of year 4th grade target for my 4th grade students. And if they are meeting a 982 or above, then they are considered to have met the grade level target. Okay. At the mid-year, I'm looking for a 993 or above. Remember, we're only trying to meet this once. The other question I'll sometimes get is they had a student that was promoted, let's say either through the OSTP, through a screener, somebody who did not require ongoing intervention under the RSA as a 4th grader, and that school going ahead and assessing them, which is perfectly fine, but you are not required to write a reading plan for those students if they happen to dip back down. You can, as a district, you are perfectly able to make that decision, but it's not required under state law, nor is it monitored through our office. Okay. All right.
Okay, here's an easy one, I think. For 4th and 5th graders, is the IPRI IEP criteria for all good cause exemption kids or just IEP kids?
Okay, can you say that to me one more time?
For 4th and 5th grade, is the IPRI criteria for good cause exemption for all kids or just IEP kids?
So for 4th and 5th grade, still not quite, I'm really drawing a blank. I'll tell you what, since I'm drawing a blank on this, let me address this question with you. And Brenda, can you mark who I need to email afterwards just to get that? Thank you. Because for some reason I am not comprehending the question today. And it's probably just
if a K through 3 student is on an IEP and is being served in a SPED classroom, do they need an IPRI? Some of ours are not able to take our station screener.
Okay, so at this point in time, then I would say yes, because there are things on the IPRI that are required under state law that are not included on an IEP. So even if they are in special education, because even though through special education, we're still working to meet those reading needs, the goals should align. So if the goal for the IEP is to recognize letter names, that should be the goal on the IPRI. It should be a separate goal. But basically, there are some things there that we are obligated to make sure that parents are aware of and that have to be on that IPRI.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm that next year we can use MAP fluency for both screening and dyslexia screening.
That is correct.
Our school is using MAPS and STAR as well as DIBBLES for those not reaching grade level goals. Is this appropriate or excessive testing?
That to me seems pretty excessive. So you're using 3 different screening assessments, which is a pretty broad type of assessment that all tell you basically the same thing. All they're telling you is the student's at risk or not at risk for reading difficulties. What might be a better choice is to choose one of those to identify students who are at risk or not at risk. And then if you feel that there's more information needed, to use an informal diagnostic like a phonological awareness survey, a phonics survey, building some of that data to even something like a words their way of spelling inventory that can identify if that student is able to apply those phonics skills or not. And then being able to pinpoint exactly what is it that that student is needing. So we want to maybe minimize the screening assessments that we're doing, because the purpose of those screening assessments is to give a quick, broad view of who do we need to be worried about and who do we not need to be worried about. We can identify through one of those the students that we likely need to be concerned about. And so what you might want to do is look back over the data over the last few years, over the different 3 assessments, and which one do you feel is giving you the most accurate data for your student population. And that's the one I would probably stick with, and then see what is it that we might need to bump up. Do we need to look at maybe a phonics survey? Do we need to get out the core reading program and look at that? Or there's a lot of great and some often free or very inexpensive informal diagnostics that can be used to help identify the specific needs of students and help us group them in small flexible groups so that we can better address what their deficits might be.
Okay, here's a question for clarification. We don't write an IPRI for kindergarten until middle of year, correct?
That is, yes, that is, it's not required until then. If you want to write it beginning of the year, you have that option, but it is not required under state statute until mid-year. We still assess our kindergarten students at beginning of year, and we still turn in the number of students who are below that grade level target on the beginning of year report, but we don't have to write that plan until that mid-year for our kindergarten students, okay? Because a lot of times what we'll notice, ask any kindergarten teacher, they'll have a lot of kids at that beginning of the year, but by mid-year we have a lot of those kids that drop off.
What if SPED students are unable to take the screener?
Allow them to time out or move forward, include them in on your counts, write that IPRI, and move on, okay? If they are not able to do that, we're trying to address, and we've been working with the SPED department to see if we can get a little bit better guidance on that. But for right now, what we have from our legal office is that we still have to include those on that counts and let those timeout rules apply.
When using the changeable IPRI, how can you copy so one doesn't have to redo what you did last year?
Ooh, I don't know. on that fillable IPRI, yeah, that would be a great IT question for a PDF. If anybody is really great with figuring out fillable PDFs and wants to send me that answer, that'd be great. I'd love it, but I truly don't know.
I might have misunderstood, but do students who have an IEP with reading goals need an IPRI if they are tier 2 or 3 on the benchmark assessment?
They do, because we have requirements under statutory, there's statutory requirements on that IPRI under state law that we have to provide information to parents and have that plan that are not always included on the IEP. So yes, IEP students are not exempt from that IPRI. We, in that K through 3 grade range, we still need to have that filled out for them.
On the sample IPRI, could you address the supplemental instruction and intervention plan?
Well, let's see. I'm sure we can. Let me move this menu out of the way for a moment. so that I can actually see my screen. Oh, let's go to that. All right. So if we come down here to, I'm just going to come down to our printable IPRI. Supplemental, where are we going here? I'm telling you, today feels like a Monday. Let me just kind of go through this real quick. So the assessments used for informal diagnostic purposes, that would be things like, well, we used a phonological survey, we used a phonics survey, we did a spelling inventory. What was it that we identified, that we used to really help identify those needs of that student? Okay, there may be something filled out here. There may be several things filled out here. There may not be anything filled out here, especially if we've already identified what the needs of that student is, what the needs are for that student, okay? Obviously, this is an area we want to pay very close attention to. What is the specific area where this child has some difficulties? Please don't think that just because a student is in 3rd grade and struggled with an oral reading fluency exam, that their issue is with reading fluency. Very likely it is probably with phonemic awareness or phonics. If they were really struggling with something like that, especially if their accuracy is low. So that's one of the reasons these diagnostic assessments can be really helpful. We know from the oral reading fluency that there was a problem, but we don't know particularly what the problem was. So make sure that we're keeping aware of what is it that the specific area, because if we're not addressing the area of need, then I don't care how much intervention we give that student, they will not move forward the way we want them to. Let's see here. Supplemental services, is that what we're asking about? Supplemental instruction.
Supplement instruction and
Okay.
intervention plan.
Yeah, so this supplemental services. So some of the things, and again, this is coming off of a legal document. There are some things that are that we're required to make sure that we have as options. They don't have to all be provided, but we have to, that are specifically mentioned in statute. So we have listed those on this example for the IPRI. So it may be that we are providing maybe an extended daily reading block. We're providing after school tutoring. What are we providing in this setting for this student? And then what are in the instructional services that will we be providing during that time? So if we're doing after school tutoring, what are we doing with that after school tutoring? This is just meant to help guide you as a school to make sure that we know what we're doing for that student. And then we also, one of the statutory requirements is to ensure that we are providing some strategies that the family can also use to help their students at home. I will be honest, putting just reading at home for 20 minutes is probably not going to help your families. But is there a program that the school is providing that maybe spending some extra time would be helpful for them? Or is there some read at home strategies that you can give? Or is there 1 or 2 page document that you can say, when you are reading with your student and they come to a word they don't know, these are the strategies that we want you to use, that we use in our classroom, that we want you to use at home to help them. And then with this, it's just identifying what is the intervention plan. So specifically, what is it that we're doing with this student? So on this date, we've said that Joey is really struggling with phonemic awareness, blending and segmenting sounds within a word. So we're going to put on this date that we're going to start working with him, and we're going to use program X that's going to do this. And let's say the reading specialist is going to do program X for 10 minutes a day, 3 times a week. We come back and we start looking at how he's doing, and it's say middle of November, and we say, you know what, he's really not making that much progress. We think we need to intensify what he's doing. So we're going to put the November date. We're going to say we're still using program X and the reading specialist is still doing this, but instead we're going to do this for 10 minutes, 5 days a week. And so we're going to intensify it. Okay. This is a way to record that. Some of our screening assessments have a way that you can record this same thing on their program. And if you're doing progress monitoring, where you can, it'll help with the graphing of that progress monitoring data. Some of our screening assessments don't have that capability. So this is here if you need to record what is the intervention plan and what changes are being made throughout the year as we're seeing things. So if we see Joey getting something on segmenting and blunting phonemes, and we come back 7 months later and they haven't made progress and we've not seen any change to intervention, that's a big red flag. Because this is something that should be coming pretty quickly. If we're seeing great progress, we want to make changes. Now let's go to the next skill. What is it that we need to do? That type of thing. So this is, again, just recording those intervention plans. What are we doing for that child? How is that making changes as we continue to look at that data? Because remember, we don't just fill this out at the beginning of the year and never look at it again. We're looking at this as the student is making that progress throughout the year so that they can continue to progress. Okay. All right, Brenda.
Okay, here was a clarification on our earlier question. So for 4th and 5th graders on a probationary promotion or promoted through good cause exemption, I'm aware that probationary promoted kids automatically get an IPRI, but not sure about students who were promoted through another exemption, ELL, or previously retained. Just wanting to make sure we are providing all we need.
Absolutely. And thank you for clarifying that. I don't know why I wasn't understanding the first question. So yes, students who are promoted through an exemption, remember it's that they require intensive intervention. So whether it's recorded, that documentation of that intervention is recorded through the IEP, like for example, our Good Cause 2, Good Cause 5 kids, that would be IEP students, or whether it is the intensive intervention is recorded through their language IEP, the LIEP for EL students under Good Cause 1. The remainder of our students need some other way of documenting that intervention took place. So it would make sense that that IPRI can be that documentation document. It's redundant, but okay.
Okay, on STAR, for example, if the student cannot independently get past the practice questions, would you recommend assisting them for the sake of getting a score or just documenting that, including them in the count and writing the IPRI?
And if they cannot get through the practice questions at all, is it because they can't handle the technology, or they're having difficulties manipulating the technology, or they have difficulty understanding what's being asked of them of completing the skill? And if you need to provide a little assistance to be able to get to that knowledge, that's fine. But if you are providing any assistance, that's automatic that they're struggling in some way. So I would be very, very cautious about hitting that assistance, because it can be that line that we cross sometimes, that it becomes, once we do it for one, we tend to do it for a lot more. And we want to make sure that we're getting those accurate scores. But if you've got that kindergarten student that's still trying to figure out how to use a mouse and we're not getting that, I would pull them off of that computer program, off the STAR. I would give them some practice outside of that first, and then put them back on the STAR to try that, rather than risking not getting an accurate reading, because they may actually be pretty on top of it with the skill. They just don't know how to manipulate the technology. So I would pull them off first, make sure they know how to do that, and then move forward from there.
Are we required to use this form, or could we create our own?
This is a sample. This is not a required form. Okay, so remember that this is a sample that's here. We do have some districts that have done that, but do be aware that if you are creating your own, that it is, that there are things on here that are statutory requirements. So you do need to make sure that you include that same information. So for example, and I've tried to put on here with this last update this year, this first section up here, this is optional. This is not required by statute. This is something that many districts asked for because they were trying to keep track of who was new to a plan, who was getting a repeating plan every year. If you are making one for your district and you know that everyone in your district provides one assessment, let's say everyone's on iStation, You don't have to have this where where a teacher has to select it. You can just say screening assessment used as iStation, and here's your information. That's perfectly fine if you want to do that. But other than this top section, you have to identify the screening assessment, what the scores are, as far as by grade level, target, and percentile, as well as the student score. You have to provide a conjoint measurement, which would be like a lexile level. You have to identify any other assessments that would have been used. You have to identify all of these areas of need. So all of these things must be included on your form. This section right here, you have to provide written evidence for the parent of what is the intervention plan. Okay, so it doesn't have to look exactly like this, but you have to provide that evidence for parents, and it has to be in writing. So just kind of keep that in mind as you are deciding what would be best for your district. Okay. And let me come back to Michelle Castleberry's question too. She was not asking about a technology related issue like a non-reader attempting to take star reading. If you have a non-reader and they're at star reading, I would scale it back like what that's recommended in the technical guidance from Renaissance, of then try it on the star early literacy. So even if it takes them back, if they still can't do that, then yeah, you're basically, they are, that is their score. They're not able to achieve one. And so they need to be on that reading plan. Okay.
Do we need to include the lexile level, or is it extra?
No, it's required in statute that says specifically conjoint measurement reading model, which is aligned to lexile level. So that has to be there. That's that term that's used in the statute, because they could not name specifically lexile, but that was also that intention of when you look, that's really the only thing that meets that definition.
Is this plan supposed to be filled out as a team that includes parents?
Ideally, yes, but realistically, I know a lot of times the teacher is going to need to have that plan in place first, like who's going to see a reading specialist, how's that schedule going to look? But keep in mind that it shouldn't be set in stone, that if a parent has some things to input there, ask for their input and see what we can do. But yeah, I mean, there's scheduling considerations that obviously have to take place before you would bring a parent in, and figuring out like number of students that the reading specialist can realistically see. So is the student in that group or not? What would that look like? So those types of conversations need to take place.
Okay, can you speak more to the conjoint piece?
Yeah, it's that just that term that was used by the legislators when writing that statute. It was conjoint measurement model is that phrase, which translates over to lexile level.
Okay, there's a question about progress monitoring from a person who's moved from 4th and 5th grade to 2nd and 3rd grade. So what's the difference they should know for progress monitoring in 2nd and 3rd?
Regardless of grade level, students who are receiving additional intervention should be having their progress monitored. Whether they're in 2nd grade, 4th grade, 10th grade, if they're receiving that additional intervention, that we need to monitor their progress. We want to know if the additional work that's being done, if they're making the growth that we expect to see, because we would expect to see that student receiving additional instruction to be making more growth than their peers. If they're making less growth, it's not because that they are a low reader, it's that we need to bump up what we're doing, because that's the whole point of intervention, is to increase their growth rate beyond that of their peers that are just receiving core instruction. So generally, students who are receiving more intensive intervention should be monitored more frequently. So students who are maybe at that tier 2 level, or maybe just getting a few extra supports, once a month would be sufficient. If the students are receiving more intensive supports, more at a tier 3 level, they're a year behind their peers, it might be that every other week or even weekly might be more appropriate to be able to really see those data points, because obviously the more intensive that intervention, the faster we should see that growth rate going, okay?
Are students who are promoted to 4th through the screener required to have an IPRI?
The students who are promoted through a good cause exemption or through that student reading proficiency team. Okay.
I think you may have already talked about Castleberry's question, maybe.
Okay.
There's one more. Can you explain the distinction between the conjoint measurement lexile and ZPD?
Not in the time that we have right now. I'll tell you what, we'll hold on to that, and that's something that we can maybe get a little bit more detailed guidance later on. Okay. Thanks for understanding that one. So,
okay, that's it. That's it for our questions.
Woohoo! I knew there'd be a few today. So let me come down here just real quick. So we've talked about this. I want to briefly address our Science of Reading Academies with our letters training. You've been hearing about, if you haven't been hearing about this, you've had your head under a rock, around me at least. So this is the what we've designated $13 million from our American Recovery Plan dollars for, to be able to provide that letters training to 10,000 teachers across our state. This is something that has just been in huge high demand. And if you'll recall, we've done letters for quite some time across Oklahoma, but we've done this under a previous edition where it would be a module here, a module there, and you would show up for 2, 3, 4 days. You would be drinking out of a fire hydrant as a ton of information is thrown at you, and then you'd go back to your classroom and you'd go do your thing and say, that was really nice. That was a lot of great information. Let me go back and do what I used to do. So, because it was just too overwhelming. So with this new edition, it sounds like a really big commitment, and I get it. It is. I've gone through it myself. I know. But this is the most transformative professional development that I think I have ever been involved with in the 28 years I've been in education. So it's, when you spread this out over an hour a week, it's a lot of really good information about how kids learn to read, how to recognize when they're having struggles, and what to do about it. It's not specific to a program. So whether you're using Journeys, Wonders, Reading Street, anything else that is out there, Super Kids, all the other different programs, then you can apply this information to say, this is what will work for my kids. Because let's face it, those boxed programs that we have can be really helpful, but they throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at us. And so sometimes we have to figure out, what is it that I need to use? So things like this can help us decide, based off of what I'm seeing with my kids need X, and here's where I'm going to pull this out of it for this program. And I've decided, based off of what I've learned in this, that this particular activity that they're asking us to do is really not helpful for my kids. It is not based on a lot of that research. I'm going to get that out there and save my time so that I can work on the things that really are helpful. Okay. The registration for letters has been extended until September 17th. So, and I need to add that on here. Let me just do that right here. As of right now, we have about 1,750 teachers signed up across the state of Oklahoma, and that includes K-3 teachers. It includes special education teachers, reading specialists, instructional coaches, administrators. It also, because we have that space right now, we are including our pre-K teachers and our teachers for grades 4 and above that have expressed a desire to be involved with this information as well. Just keep in mind that if you teach 4th grade and above or pre-K, you may have to realize that the intention of this curriculum is geared towards those students that are beginning to read. You may have to make some adjustments as you're learning the information. That's perfectly fine, very doable, because we have had some colleagues that have more middle school, high school experience go through letters, and they still found it very valuable. But I always like to make sure people are very aware of that, that you will have to make those adjustments. They're not going to change the program to address high school or middle school. It's geared towards beginning readers or those students that are learning and struggling with reading. So if you still want to get involved with that, please feel free, grab someone with you to do it. That'd be great. But I mean, I won't be able to talk about it enough. And I see a lot of people on this call who have been involved with letters in the past. Joy Osborne, I see you. Do you want to unmute and say anything about it?
Uh, yes, I have all of my staff and assistants signed up for it because it is such an amazing thing. And I went through it last year in Mustang, and this is after getting my master's, reading specialist. And I just learned so much from going through the program. And I know people have gone through it in the past and it's completely different. The videos really help. Just seeing it applied, and I feel like it really identified the holes in our curriculum that it helped us to see, oh, we're not getting this. And there were so many kids that I could visualize as I was learning. It's like, that's why they're doing it. And especially the EL kids. I felt like it really identified, especially just some of the things like the how they place their mouths and understanding the vowels. It just was such an eye-opening thing. And I tell everybody they need to do letters. And so I'm so excited you guys are doing it.
Thanks, Joy. Sorry to put you on the spot because I did not warn you. I just happened to see your name and go, oh, I know Joy's involved with that. And it's always nice to have some other thoughts on there. So thank you for that. Okay, I never like to leave these meetings without leaving you a couple of resources for your consideration. So just very quickly, because I know we are only having 3 minutes left. There are some free on-demand webinars on a variety of topics, some of them about assessment and identifying students who are struggling that might be very helpful for you. They are offered by the Reading League and they can be found at this web address. I believe there were about 8 different webinars there, just made available for free. Also, I know that at the beginning of the year, high frequency words is also often a hot topic. So one of the things that we have addressed in the past is that learning high frequency words is very important for our beginning readers, for our struggling readers, or not struggling, our very little ones, but learning them of just straight memorization, those flashcards, what we usually do, is extremely ineffective. And so there's actually a more effective way. This is a website called Reading Rockets. If you are not familiar with Reading Rockets, this is a great website to go to for both research as well as good evidence-based practices that has a great article here about a model that's more effective for teaching high frequency words. So if you teach kindergarten, first grade, you're working with high frequency words, you're a coach that's working with those kindergarten, first grade teachers, this might be a really good resource, especially if you're looking for something to look at for our PLC time, of saying, how can we look at this and maybe make some adjustments to our practice this year? And then a couple of upcoming professional development opportunities that's always nice to be aware of. Again, the Reading League is having their 5th national annual conference. It is virtual this year for obvious reasons. I miss in-person conferences, but the nice thing about virtual conferences is more people are able to attend. This is going to be held on Wednesday, October 13th. They will have 2 live keynotes as well as a panel discussion in the evening, and then 18 pre-recorded sessions. So with the registration, you have unlimited access to all of the pre-recorded sessions, the keynotes, and the discussion with no time restrictions, so that you have them to see and view whenever you desire. So there's the registration link. It is a $149 registration fee. So just be aware of that, but that might be something to consider for some professional development later on. That's something certainly that professional development monies from RSA could be spent on. And then there is also the Oklahoma State Higher Regents has their reading conference coming up later here in September on Friday. Again, it is also virtual. There are 3 speakers, Jennifer Saravallo, Dr. Sherry Vicinda from Oklahoma State University, and then they've roped me into this somehow. So also there is the early bird registration fee has passed, but it is $50 to attend if you register by September 22nd. So we would hope to see you at some of those opportunities as well. And then we have our next meeting on October 6th and the next Wednesday at 2 o'clock, same Zoom ID and passcode. If you have questions that you're thinking about beforehand, and I know I try to keep track of those as we're building that agenda. If you have some ideas of some things that are coming up that's bothering you, I just usually build this off of emails that I tend to get. So don't hesitate to give us a call. And thank you so much for your time this afternoon. All right. And I think we are going to, were there any other major questions on here, Deb, that we needed to address before we close? I think anything else we can get later on in documents.
The only one I saw went back to the IPRI. Is there any way to get the editable IPRI form on the website to be fillable as well? It doesn't let you check on items.
Yeah, the only way you could make it fillable is to make it a PDF, which means it can no longer be edited. So I would say if that was the case, then make that, if you needed to make an edit to it, then you would have to edit and then make it into a PDF and then make it fillable from there. So yeah. That makes it.
I think that was it.
All right. Well, I know we have another meeting to go to, so I hope everyone has a great Wednesday and we will see you soon. Bye.